Well, it looks like the people jumping in the waiting room has slowed down. So let's look at yesterday's quiz. Now, on yesterday's quiz, the first two were definitely think about it questions. Had to do a little bit of analysis, shall we say. So number one, which of the following release their eggs in the host's feces? So let's see, that's not where we started actually. We started with the flukes. So with flukes, eggs are released in feces. And what was our next choice? Oh, that Ascarids was our first choice. All right. So Ascarids, eggs are released in feces. And then our other choice was tapeworms. Tapeworms, eggs are released in feces. And so all of these, excuse me, all of these release eggs in the feces would be the answer there. Now let's see. And number two, which of the following can be passed directly from human to human without going to another host? So Ascarids is the right answer. What were our choices, by the way? Our choices were Ascarids, flukes, and tapeworms. So tapeworms, pigs eat contaminated food, so it has to go through a pig, so that would not have been the right answer. And flukes, eggs hatch, and the larva enters, whoops, and the larva enters a snail, so we have to have snails, and then it goes to a fish, so we've got two extra hosts in that one. But in the Ascarids, eggs are released in feces, and then directly eggs are ingested. Now, this particular card somehow got deleted off of CRAM, but that information is in the book. So the correct answer is Ascarids go directly without having to go to another host. All right, number three, hookworms come out at night to mate. No, that would be pinworms, so that's false. Number four, following is not part of water being carried up plants. Well, adhesion was the water sticking to the side of the plant stem tubes. Cohesion was water sticking to other water molecules. Transpiration is water evaporating from leaves. Perspiration is sweat, and that's what you do, not plants. Iron and sulfur are minor nutrients. That was pretty straightforward right out of the notes book of cards. 6, this is the one that I went through and gave you all a point for it. Few people got it right. It was in the card that we looked at way back, way back. Oh, I started going the wrong way. That's terrible. back farther than that. Almost there. Okay, it was here. Gymnosperms are conifers, but I did not put that. Apparently, I know I didn't put it in cram, and I don't think I put it in the book. And so I just gave you a point for that one. And number 7, which single-celled animals have chloroplasts? That is the euglena, which is, and he got it right. So that's the answers and the whys for the quizzes from yesterday. Now, find where we are today. Way down past that. And I'll have some pictures for you today, and at least one of them is particularly gross. I'll try and remember to warn you before we get there. Okay, so we got through reptiles yesterday, and now to birds. Okay, unique characteristics of birds. Their bodies are covered mostly. Most birds do not have feathers on their legs and feet, although there are a few birds that do. And there are a few birds like turkeys and turkey vultures that do not have feathers on their head, but for the most part, their bodies are covered with feathers. Now, feathers are cool, by the way, so you don't need to know any of these terms. But feather has that main, I need a darker color. Feather has this main shaft going up the center. Calamus, you don't need to know that. At the end, and then in here it's the rachis, you don't need to know that. The broad part of the feather is called the vane. You may already know that, but you don't need to. And if we were to enlarge this, the vane has many little branches coming off. And then on those barbs are even smaller branches, and they're almost impossible to see without a magnifier, but then on each of the little barbules there are hooks. And so we end up with a structure that is very, very light, but surprisingly strong with a lot of wind resistance. And it can stand up to the beating of flapping against the air, flapping against the ground, flapping against other birds or predators that might be attacking them, flying into a tight little bush, and it can tear apart and then zip back together. Now, I'm going to try to do something different here, and I don't know how it's going to work. I tried it on my end earlier, and it worked fine on my end, but I don't know how this comes through on your end. So, hopefully, now I have a full screen picture of me. It's not the nicest thing in the world, but that's what I've got. And here's a feather. This is a turkey feather. We have wild turkeys. When my wife takes a walk out in the field, in the woods, if she finds a turkey wing feather, she picks it up. I don't know why. We've got a whole bottle full of these. I think she's saving up just in case we ever have to go back to writing with quills. But the thing is, on this feather, you can see, and this is old, that's why the turkey shed it and it's a little bit beat up, but you can see, I hope, that this kind of sticks together in one solid piece. I hope you can tell I'm tugging on it and it's bouncing back and forth. But if it gets pulled hard enough, it separates between those little barbs, and that's not a good thing, especially if you get a lot of them in a feather. So because of those barbs and barbules and hooks, the bird, it's called preening. The bird can take its bill and kind of rub it a few times down that, and it zips back together, kind of like one-dimensional Velcro maybe. and it goes back to being a solid unit. You can see right here where the end of that tear was, and I didn't quite get it all the way sealed up. But birds can do this. Maybe they fly into a tree, a really tight tree, and they get a whole bunch of little openings in their feather, and then they come along. And if you look, you'll see birds do this, going through particularly their tail feathers and their wing feathers, rubbing their beak down them. And it does it a few times. And it's all back together, one solid piece. So feathers are cool. Hope that worked. All right, back to PowerPoint. What else about birds? There we go. All right, birds have hollow bones. Now, you may think that mammals have hollow bones, but their bones are filled with marrow. So even though they're not bone solid to the center, they are still filled. Birds have hollow bones that is connected to a network of air sacs, and that network of air sacs is connected to the lungs. And this is a really cool thing too. Now, so it turns out that, and I don't need the video on anymore. It's probably going to mess with my data, so I should turn that off. When I say mess with my data, I'm using a phone hotspot with a marginal signal, and it can't handle too much data too fast. So anyway, hollow bones. So birds' flight is energy-wise enormously expensive. Literally, there are some birds at some stage in their life that can starve to death. They're burning so much energy, they could starve to death in 2 days. When they're young and growing, they can starve to death in 1 day, not even a 24-hour day, just the daylight time, like 12 to 15 hours, they can starve to death. They use an enormous amount of energy. In order to burn energy fast enough, they need more oxygen. So these air sacs, if you know how a turbocharger or a supercharger works, no, you don't need to know how they work. If you know what they do, they force more air into the combustion chamber of the car so it can burn more fuel. And birds basically do the same thing with air sacs. So, and you don't need to know any of these names. But you see all these white things are air sacs connected to the lungs. And they actually end up being connected to the hollow bones too. But what this does, when the when the bird inhales, some of the air goes into its lungs and some of the air fills up the air sacs. And then when the bird exhales, fresh air from the air sacs goes into the lungs on its way out. So essentially, when you breathe in, inhale, you have oxygen, oxygen is O2, oxygen-rich air. Exhale, you are blowing out oxygen-poor air because you've been using the oxygen in your lungs. That's you, Y-O-U. In a bird, when they inhale, they take in oxygen-rich air, just like you do. Except when they exhale, they're getting more oxygen-rich air from these air sacs, so they also exhale oxygen-rich air. And it does exactly the same thing as a turbocharger or a supercharger would do on a gasoline or diesel engine. Puts more oxygen in the combustion chamber, except in this case, the combustion chamber is the muscle cells instead of the pistons moving up and down. Birds have an enlarged sternum for flight. Now I'm going to go back to the picture here again, so bear with me while I figure this out. I mean, I figured it out, but I'm not super good at it yet. So on you, the sternum is your breastbone. It's right here. If you take your hand and just rub it up and down your sternum, you can feel that it's flat. It is broad, it's probably about this wide, and it's probably about that thick. So your sternum, a normal mammal sternum, is flat. Okay, back to the sharing. Let's see, share screen. Don't need that video eating up data. On birds. Now, here you go. This is a turkey carcass from somebody's Thanksgiving. This right here is the sternum of a turkey. If we were to look at your sternum in cross section, like if we were to cut you in half through your chest and look down at the sternum bone that we cut in half, the sternum would look like this. If we were to take this turkey right here and cut its sternum in half, its sternum would look like this. And this big ridge is called the keel. Now, why is this a big deal? Well, the muscles of your chest that move your arm forward, if you put your arms out in front of you and clap, are attached to the sternum. Those are the muscles that beat the wings in birds. So when those muscles might be like this. In birds, those muscles are like this. You know, given if you had a bird the size of a person, instead of that muscle being, oh, I don't know, maybe a quarter to half an inch and a really bulky person thick, if you had a bird as big as you, that muscle might be 2 or 3 or 4 inches, maybe more thick. And in fact, this muscle on a bird is so strong that if you, okay, now keep in mind, all right, here you go again. I have to go back to the picture. Stop sharing video. So when we illustrate flying, we flap our arms up and down like this. Except birds don't walk upright. Birds, if you think about it, their torso, their body is horizontal to the ground. So when a bird flaps, hitting my hand on my chair, when a bird flaps, it flaps like this, up and down, bending over. Now, if I stand up straight, that's flapping like this. So all those muscles attach to the sternum right here. Now, you've seen these pictures of people with trying to fly in the old days, make big wings and flap them, strap them to their arms and try and fly. Well, birds don't beat like this, they beat like this. So if you made your huge old wing and tried to beat like birds do, your chest muscles aren't strong enough. You would have to spend a couple of years working out at the gym until you had pec muscles that were like this, which would just look weird. But then the next problem is, so you say, all right, I'm bulked up, I'm strong enough. And you put these big old wing structures, which for you would have to be probably 10 feet long on each wing. You take these huge 10 feet, 20-foot wingspan, 10 for each wing, and you say, okay, I'm going to fly. And you pull them back and you pull down for all you're worth. Whoosh! and the sternum you have isn't strong enough for pectoral muscles this thick, and the muscles just go and pull off the sternum. Sounds painful, and I'm sure it would be. But that's why the birds have to have their keel. Let's see now. Back to the screen share. That's why the birds have to have this big old keel structure on their bone, this ridge that sticks up on the turkey, so the muscles don't pull off. I think there was one more point. Oh, yes. I didn't get a picture. I'm sure you've all seen, I'm sure you know what a wishbone is. But the wishbone is the collarbone on the bird. Your collarbone, you know what it is, and they're separate. You can move one arm up and down, or shoulder, or the other shoulder up and down, and you can see or feel your collarbones moving up and down, but that isn't strong enough for flight. So the birds have them fused together into one bone, the wishbone. And birds are oviparous. By the way, it was pointed out to me that there is a typo in the book on oviparous and ovoviviparous. It says they're the same thing. That's a typo in the book. Oviparous. Eggs develop outside the body. Ovoviviparous, eggs develop inside the body. And I will take that into account when your quiz is graded, because there was a question about that. Or there were a couple of questions about that, and I'll have to check and see if they do apply specifically to the one that was wrong in the book, then I will take that into account. Last group is mammals. Mammals, the young are nourished by milk made by mammary glands. I'm sure that's nothing new to you. Milk comes from mammary glands. That's where the name mammal comes from. Mammals are viviparous, with the young nourished by placenta before birth. Now, here is the disturbing picture. This is a placenta. That's a human placenta. After the baby was born, baby was attached. There's the umbilical cord. The other end of this umbilical cord, it's clamped to this little clamp right here. But the other end of this umbilical cord used to be attached to the baby before the baby was born. This is the placenta, frequently referred to as the afterbirth, because it comes out after the baby is born. The placenta is how the baby gets its nourishment. Basically, and this is oversimplified, in the mother's tissue, there are these little pockets because placenta is a combination of mother's and baby's tissue. And then the baby's tissue, the capillaries go into these pockets and come back out. The capillaries go into the pockets and come back out. And these pockets are filled with mother's blood. MB is mother's blood. So the baby's blood comes into these little packets and pockets, and the waste materials leave, and the mother's blood absorbs it, and the nutrients and oxygen enter from the mother's blood into the baby's blood. So this way the nutrients and wastes can be exchanged back and forth between the mother and baby without the mother's blood and the baby's blood actually mixing. It would actually be a problem, particularly if they had different blood types, if the mother's blood and the baby's blood were mixing with each other. So that's basically oversimplified how a placenta works. You may have noticed on the the information email I sent you this morning, you may have noticed that calf was born in the night last night, and I was pulling placenta out of mama cow this morning. Yum. Yes, there are actually some people who, I'm not making this up. Okay, before I say that, most mammals, I don't know about most, an awful lot of mammals eat their placenta. The mom eats the placenta after they're born. Even herbivores, the mom eats the placenta after they're born. Part of that is because there's a lot of nutrients, a lot of protein in it. Part of that, though, is to keep from attracting predators with the scent. If the placenta laid there and started to decay, every predator within 2 or 3 miles would smell it and it would be attracted. And even though the baby might not be right there where the placenta is, it would bring a predator into the near proximity. And there are, I'm not making this up, people who eat the placenta. Some people freeze it. Some people have it dried and made into capsules. It's probably not bad for you, but I'm sure we get enough nutrients without it in our culture. Nonetheless. All right, hair is the last unique trait of mammals, and I don't need to tell you anything about hair. It's not all dense, it's not all long. You have hair on your arms and legs, but for most of you at least, it's pretty fine and thin. And some mammals only have hair on maybe 1 or 2 parts of their body. So hair, some animals are completely covered, some mammals just have a little, but either way, body with hair is one of the characteristics of mammals. All right, now that brings us to card 14, which we already did. And I have a little bit of good news for you just before I let you go. And that is that we got these cards covered a little faster than I thought we might. So tomorrow there will still be a quiz, but there will not be a lesson, a live feed tomorrow. Tomorrow, all you have to do is take the quiz. There will not be a live feed on Friday either. There will be a worksheet on Friday, but all you have to do tomorrow is take the quiz. So unless you have any questions about anything, you are free to leave. And hearing no questions, seeing no hands raised, I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting.